I know that a lot of people experience seasonal depression, and when it's coupled with grief, it's almost unbearable. But I believe the way that you can survive is if someone can identify what those sad feelings are. You know, people often say, I just don't feel well, or I feel low, or I'm sad, or, I just want to cry. But we've got to go further and identify all those companions that have attached themselves to your grief, because there are companions that attach themselves to grief and come out and show themselves in different ways.
And say more about that. Companions can look like what?
Well, all emotions are connected. If you're happy and joyful, then exuberant, as well on the other spectrum. If you're sad and you have severe grief, you can have a guilty type grief. And that was the kind of grief that I felt. I felt like I had done something as a mother to cause the death of my son. So I had a guilty grief. And then there's a bitter type grief where you're angry, but you're also very bitter, and it makes you really sarcastic and negative, and there's an angry type grief. There's a denial type grief, and there are different stages, we know, but grief shows itself in so many ways. And I think that people just don't recognize that when they have a loss of a significant person, when they don't attend to that wound, because it is a wound, then it festers into other areas. It festers into anger most times, but then it'll fester into isolation. It can fester into addictive behaviors. All kinds of companions will come along grief in an effort to soothe yourself, but if you don't acknowledge it, like really be aware, I lost this person and it hurts and I'm angry, and then seek out some help. In the
Yeah.
Black community, we don't seek out help.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a taboo. I can remember certain family members who were on disability for mental illnesses. And I can remember other family members saying, they're receiving a crazy check.
Yeah.
And, even if you go to a doctor for mental issues, they, term it as, like, crazy. You're going to see a doctor because you're crazy, or whatever word that they want to phrase. But I have always embraced therapy and counseling. I've always, since I was in college, I've
Yeah.
always embraced being able to get things up and out.
Yes, absolutely. And I started therapy when I was a freshman in college. And
Mhm.
I haven't gone to therapy in recent years, except for one session I had with the person I was seeing this year.
Mhm.
But I have gone to therapy. Like, I'm such a believer in therapy. It has really helped me. It's been a good companion
Mhm.
with my spirituality.
Absolutely.
And but my one of my close friends, she has been advising me for a couple of years to go
Mhm.
back to therapy
Mhm.
because of the losses of the men in my family.
Mhm.
And she sees a connection
Mhm.
when I'm in a relationship and that relationship doesn't work out,
Mhm.
and I'm so heartbroken,
Mhm.
and she sees a connection,
Mhm.
there. And I know that she's right. Like this year, I was like, I really do see what she
Mhm.
is talking about. And
Mhm.
even today, I was thinking about, because I've been thinking about, oh, do I want to start dating again? And then this is why I was thinking about it, because I was like, well, what if I connect with someone and then it doesn't work out, and then my heart gets broken, and then I'm starting all over again. And it
Mhm.
really is, if I haven't healed the thing,
Right.
then that pain
Mhm.
is still a deep pain. I
Mhm.
mean, I think you're hurt when you hurt is hurt,
Absolutely.
but the deep dive of the pain might not be as severe
Yeah.
if you know what I'm saying? If I
Yeah.
address what that grief is, if I address that loss, all
Yeah.
the losses.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with your friend. And I don't think it would hurt anything. I was riding along today and I was listening to the radio, and they were talking about PTSD in soldiers. And it just immediately clicked. We have PTSD and grief.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
if you start to think about when you get into, well, let's move back to when children lose a parent, because this is the first thing I thought about, and that surviving parent may get sick, something as simple as a cold, that child can go into panic mode, high
Yeah.
anxiety, great intensity of clinginess, because in their mind and in their world, they may not be able to verbalize it, but they have a fear that that surviving parent might die. And as adults, we tend to do the same thing when we have unresolved grief in our grief journey. We have a bit of PTSD when we get into relationships because we're thinking this might end. We're not thinking maybe the person might die, but we kind of associate what we're in as a potential death.
Yeah.
And we've got to kind of get to the place where we can work these things out, because the more bottled up you keep it inside, it just jumbles up and it floods over into other things. Every area of our life is affected when we don't face our grief.
Yeah, that is so true. And it's so important to stay or be connected to your faith. And
Mhm,
for me, one of the things that has helped me is not only my relationship with God, but my relationship with God has helped me to have a relationship with the people who are gone,
mhm,
to have a spiritual relationship. And with my mom, with my dad, with my brothers, to still be connected, knowing that they still exist in a spirit form. And you even have said that your son, you heard your son speak
mhm.
to you.
I did. When I was in the hospital after I had delivered my son, there was a moment where I was sitting in a chair by myself, and I was just trying to reconcile that place in between where you're trying to figure out, did this happen or didn't this happen? Is this real or is it not? And my eyes were closed, and I can remember very vividly. Um, my son appeared right before me, but he was a toddler, about 3 years old. He had a head full of curly hair, and the words he spoke to me have stayed with me my whole life. He said, "It's all right, mama." Now, in that moment, it wasn't all right, but you know how you receive something and you just tuck it back. And over the years, I've had to pull on that. It is all right. It is all right. You know, and I've taken comfort in that over the years, that it is all right, because my faith tells me that God knew this was going to happen. Nothing takes him by surprise, you know, and though it was not my will, it was clearly his will. And I remember my pastor at that time was talking with me, and he said, "This is the hardest thing you've ever gone through, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, the only way that God can get children into heaven is through human forms, because there are only angels in heaven." And he said, "So you've been chosen." And at the time, I couldn't comprehend that. As the time went on, I accepted that. And I just held on to that and I tucked it back. And my faith let me know that it would be okay, but I would have to do some things to help me to get okay.
Yeah. Wow. I have so much clarity about your journey all of a sudden.